Formula One returns to our lives this weekend with the Hungarian Grand Prix at the wonderful circuit at the Hungaroring in Budapest. Now, if you're a Formula One fan, doubtless you would know that this weekend the race will be the last one that you're going to see in about a month, because coming up after this weekend will be the summer break. And obviously, on one hand, I'm always a little sad when, I know for a fact that there's not going to be that much F1 racing happening. But of course, you have to remember, with the number of races we have in the modern calendar, a break in the middle of the season is a much needed thing. So can't really begrudge, the drivers that too much, but I will still be waiting for when F1 returns. Anyway, before that happens, of course, we have to focus on the race at hand, which is the Hungarian Grand Prix. And of course, if you followed my videos on this channel, you'd know for a fact that, we tend to look at 5 burning questions that we want to talk about before the race. Of course, sometimes the race can and will, of course, surprise us, but these are what I think are the top major 5 talking points ahead of this weekend's race. So let's go on to the first one. Sorry about that. And there we go. Sebastian Vettel took everyone by storm when he out of nowhere announced his retirement. In fact, if you were following, Vettel and F1 related news on Friday, there were 2 major bombshells that dropped. The first was that the German joined Instagram. Bear in mind, he's had no social media till this point. So that in itself was newsworthy. And then he dropped the second bombshell when he announced his retirement. Now, obviously, there's still a while to go before Vettel's final race as such. But doubtless, there's going to be all eyes on him because he's just announced the decision. Tributes have been pouring in from all over the world. And people are going to be looking at every single race that he races now, knowing full well that it's going to be the last at every single venue. Now, obviously, 2021 and 22 have been very underwhelming years in Vettel's career, thanks in no small part to the Aston Martin car not being anywhere close to as competitive as they were in 2020 under their Racing Point guys. But can Vettel pull off something, miraculous or spectacular? Remember, last year he did finish second before that position was taken away from him. And of course, if there is some degree of surprise in the top 3 finishes, we might just be in for another Vettel podium. Do you think that's possible? Let us know in the comments. I, for one, would personally be very excited to see Vettel show off a little bit of that old magic before he does get to call it a day. And so I'm definitely going to be keeping all eyes on Vettel, and that for me is the first major talking point, mainly because the news is still so fresh. Now, moving on to the next major talking point is, of course, Ferrari and Charles Leclerc. Now, obviously, Leclerc had a far from ideal French Grand Prix. He ended up crashing out whilst being in the lead, and Verstappen ended up taking a pretty easy win at France. So obviously, there's going to be a lot of speculation over Ferrari, mainly because A, they have a very unreliable, if fast, power unit, and B, there's still a lot of doubts over what strategies they have been employing. Because again, if you watch the French Grand Prix, remember there was a lot of criticism for their strategy for Carlos Sainz. So what exactly are Ferrari going to be targeting in this weekend? Well, team principal Matteo Binotto has said that the team are looking to get not just a win, but a 1-2 finish. And if that engine actually stays intact, Ferrari do have a very good chance, because the kind of circuit that the Hungaroring is arguably best suited to the Ferraris, with even the Red Bull saying that they are expecting Ferrari to be stronger at least over the course of a single lap. And that has been the case a lot this season, because Leclerc has picked up a ton of poles. Can they convert that pole or potentially even get that race win or a 1-2 on Sunday? That's their target, and it's a pretty lofty but realistic ambition at the same time. Of course, fingers crossed that their power engine actually holds up. Next major talking point is, of course, Red Bull. And at one point earlier in this season, there was a lot of talk about could Sergio Perez be in title contention. Unfortunately, the development of the Red Bull car has kind of gone away from him, which is something even he's admitted. If you want a bit of a technical tidbit in this case, the Red Bull car in the beginning of the year was a little bit more balanced in terms of the kind of pressure that it put on the front end and the rear end. However, the car as it is since has been developed and has become more of a front end car with a bit of instability in the rear. Now, Verstappen is someone who likes a car like that, because he tends to find that if there's a little bit more front end in the car, he can attack the corners better. And it's no coincidence that his performances have improved ever since then. At the same time, Checo's have kind of gone down, because again, if you remember, in France, he was nowhere near the pace. He got mugged by both both Mercedes cars, and obviously there'd be a lot of expectation on him to do better. But I think at this point we can safely say that the title isn't going Checo's way, and that if Red Bull are to win the title, it will most likely be Verstappen winning that. Now, are Red Bull going to take that hard call? They generally speaking do, and considering that Perez is like 50 odd points off Verstappen, in fact more than that if I'm not wrong, so he's quite a fair degree off him in terms of the points. I don't think it's going to be a major call, but the key is, will this be a case of salvaging what they can get? Because again, we know for a fact the Red Bulls are reliable, they're quick, but the Ferraris are expected to be faster at the Hungaroring. So it could be an interesting race. What is it that Red Bull can do to maybe upset the odds a little bit? We're going to find out soon enough. The other major talking point, of course, has to be about the Mercedes cars. Remember, there were a ton of updates to the circuit Paul Ricard in France. However, they didn't make up much of a gap in terms of qualifying, because again, they were 1.7 seconds off the pace of the Red Bulls, of the quickest Red Bull to be specific. So obviously they haven't really found that in qualifying, they haven't found that extra pace just yet. However, their car is still pretty good for races. So what exactly can the Mercs do this time around? Because remember, Mercedes have picked up a lot. They picked up a double podium in France, and generally speaking, they've been there to pounce off the scraps when one of the top two teams have had some issues. Is there something more coming? Because again, remember, they're going to be bringing a few upgrades to the Hungary as well. So obviously it would be interesting to see how those updates work, because at this point the car concept which Mercedes have taken up is so complicated that even they aren't 100% sure what might work and what might not. Because again, what is reflecting in the wind tunnels might not always translate to reality, especially since these cars are so dependent on aerodynamics and the ground effect. So could they be in for another good weekend? Could they be clawing their way back up the top of the order? Could they find a few more milliseconds and come closer to the top two? Well, that is going to be exactly what we're going to have to watch out about. I for one would be very interested to see how exactly they can bridge that gap. So obviously when it comes to the other talking points, of course, we have to talk about the midfield tussle and how exactly that might be going about. Because again, this year with the new rules, there have been a few teams that have shot up above the others, and there have been others that haven't quite performed as expected. So obviously Haas and Alfa Romeo have done well in terms of, upping the ante, and McLaren, and you could even argue that teams like Williams have severely underwhelmed. Same with Aston Martin. So obviously the midfield battle has been very crowded, but what exactly can we expect? Obviously Haas will be a team to watch out for, if you ask me, because they will be bringing their one and only major upgrade to their cars at the Hungaroring. Now again, they won't have any more updates through the year. This is their one major update, and from what we've heard from team principal Gunther Steiner, it will actually be pretty visible the kind of upgrades they've made. Whether or not that translates to the car being more competitive, because again, they've been pretty good in patches but haven't always been able to capitalize on their speed. That's something that remains to be seen. But of course, they'd be hopeful that, considering they've delayed upgrading the car up until this point of the season, and that this is going to be their only upgrade, that they can do better. As for what other teams I would be keeping an eye on, I would say Alpine, because again, they've made a few leaps and bounds this season. They're in contention for that 4th place spot, and their closest rivals are McLaren. We know for a fact McLaren have been having struggles of their own, what with their brake discs and the poor form of Danny Ricciardo. So pretty interesting to watch out on the midfield battles as well, how those will go about, because again, the way the racing is right now with these new cars, it's closer than it's ever been. So any given advantage or any given developments that are there, obviously teams will be looking to take the most off. So I personally, I don't know about you guys, I'm very, very excited for the race that is set to come this weekend in one of my favorite circuits, the Hungaroring. It's one of those old-fashioned, old-field circuits. Obviously overtaking can sometimes be a little bit tough, but it's a technically challenging circuit, and it always makes for a great race. So what exactly are you looking forward to? Let us know in the comments. What do you think will be the major talking points or the flashpoints potentially ahead of the summer break? Do let us know in the comments. Thank you all so much for joining us. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Last but not least, do also tap the bell icon so you know when we're going live or uploading a new video for you guys. Also follow us across platforms, because we are there on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram as well. It's at Sports Today OFC. So thank you all so much for joining us. As always, I've been Shane Dias, and I will be continuing to join you through the day for other updates very, very soon.